They thought I wouldn't fight back. Maybe because I lived outside their gates, on my own land, no fancy bylaws, no matching mailboxes, no fear of their board's little power trips. Maybe they saw me as the quiet veteran who minded his business, a man who wouldn't raise hell even if they dropped a winter's worth of their problems right onto his property. And that's exactly what they did. 50 tons of filthy, salt-streaked, road-gridded ice dumped without permission, without apology, without even pretending it was an accident. They crushed the shed I built with my own hands. They carved tire tracks across my legal boundary like it didn't exist. They expected my silence. They expected me to let it melt away like nothing happened. But here's what they didn't know. I don't forget trespass. I don't erase boundaries. And I don't let bullies hide behind their paperwork and polished smiles. So I took their snow, their waste, and built something they could never ignore. And this is the story of how a quiet man turned an entire HOA upside down. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to HOA Stories and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? My name, well, the name I'll give you is Jack Carter. 11 years ago, after 2 decades of military service and a lifetime of following someone else's orders, I bought 2 acres just outside the manicured gates of Maple Ridge Estates. Not a mansion, not a ranch, just quiet land sloping away from the road, a gravel driveway that growls under tires, a handmade shed, and a battered mailbox welded into a steel post that could probably stop a truck. Maple Ridge sat across from me like a polished snow globe, identical homes, uniformly trimmed lawns, and an HOA known for micromanaging everything from Christmas lights to mailbox paint. I wasn't part of them, never wanted to be. I checked every survey marker before I bought my land, made certain no covenant or bylaw could ever lay a finger on me. Then came the first real storm of the season. When I stepped outside with my coffee, I froze. Half my property was buried beneath a massive ridge of compacted snow, 8 feet tall in places, not fresh powder. This was gray, salted refuse scraped from asphalt, hauled and dumped, and the tire tracks leading in weren't accidental. A skid steer or small dump truck had crossed my clearly marked boundary and offloaded its burden like my land was their personal landfill. I followed the ruts, boots crunching through crusted ice, and stopped at the exact boundary. The tracks crossed straight over the survey pin I'd flagged in bright yellow. No hesitation, no attempt to disguise it. Then I heard it, the beep, beep, beep of a plow reversing inside Maple Ridge, and everything clicked. I returned to my house, emailed Karen Delaney, the Maple Ridge HOA president, attached photos and GPS coordinates, and requested immediate removal. Her response? A polite brush-off wrapped in bureaucratic frost. Due to limited disposal options, some redistribution of wintry accumulation may extend beyond HOA boundaries. Thank you for understanding. Redistribution. She made it sound like a natural phenomenon, not trespass. I didn't shout. Didn't rant. I simply created a folder on my desktop, Maple Ridge, Winter Violations. First photos went in, first emails. First coordinates, a seed that would eventually grow into something much larger. The next morning, I bought reflective red boundary stakes and heavy-duty caution tape. I lined my entire eastern boundary like a crime scene. Clear, visible, undeniable. A few hours later, Cole Mason, a board member with a clipboard practically glued to his hand, drove past slowly, giving me the kind of look people use when a neighbor paints their house a color they disapprove of. That evening, Karen emailed again, another polished dismissal implying that I should tolerate overflow during severe weather events. The message between the lines was simple: we do what we want, you deal with it. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A yellow skid steer rolled out of Maple Ridge, crossed the road, dipped into my ditch, and dumped another full load right over my freshly marked boundary. Not a mistake, a message. I marched down the slope, but the operator kept his eyes ahead, never acknowledging me. I documented everything, photos, video, timestamps. Then I sent a second email with county codes highlighted and a line that said, "Any further unauthorized displacement will be documented and reported." Karen responded quickly this time. They would suspend activity near my property for the remainder of the season, but insisted they bore no liability for indirect accumulation. I climbed a sturdy oak and mounted a trail camera, then another camera lower on the slope. No blind spots. I built spreadsheets, logs, maps with overlays showing property lines. If they dumped a snowflake my way, I would know. 4 days later, a heavy storm rolled in, and Maple Ridge broke their promise before the snow even settled. When dawn arrived, my red stakes were buried beneath 5 new feet of compacted, filthy snow. Tire tracks again cut straight across my line. The mound was so deep it looked like a glacier creeping down from their subdivision. This time, my anger didn't flash hot. It froze solid. I added more cameras, reinforced my log system, and documented every single violation. By the end of 2 weeks, I had proof of 6 separate illegal dumps, totaling more than 50 tons of chemically treated ice now sitting on my land. But a question gnawed at me. Why haul it onto my property when they had space inside their own? The answer came from a casual conversation at the hardware store. Ben Holtz, a snow contractor, revealed Maple Ridge had cut costs by handling snow removal in-house, skipping city disposal fees. Their retention basins filled quickly, so they quietly relocated excess onto undeveloped neighboring parcels. My land, my home, was just their convenient empty lot. I created an 8-page dossier, photos, video captures, ordinance citations, satellite overlays. I dropped it into the HOA's clubhouse mailbox addressed to Karen. 3 days later, a sheriff's SUV pulled into my driveway. Karen had reported me claiming I might be obstructing operations and posing a safety threat. The deputies reviewed my footage, my documents, and my time-stamped logs. By the time they left, even they looked irritated at her, not me, and Maple Ridge hadn't yet realized this was only the beginning. After the deputies left that day, I stood inside my kitchen staring out at the snow-smothered slope. The weight of it literal and otherwise pressed on me in a way that felt deliberate now. Maple Ridge wasn't just ignoring my boundaries. They were testing how far they could push a solitary neighbor who didn't wear their badge or bow to their bylaws. They had spun the sheriff's visit, tried to paint me as unstable, dangerous even, because nothing terrifies an HOA president more than a neighbor she cannot control. But that attempt landed flat. Facts outweighed fear. Evidence outweighed ego. And I had both stacked higher than the frozen waste piled against my trees. Still, the storm wasn't done. When the next nor'easter hit, it came with a violence that made the previous dumps look like practice. Snow hammered my land all night, thick, wet flakes that grew heavier by the minute until branches groaned under the weight. I barely slept, kept a lantern burning, listening to the creaks and thuds outside. By dawn, the bitter air felt sharper, and the world was quiet in that eerie, smothered way winter creates. I trudged through drifts up to my thighs toward the shed. I knew something was wrong before I even reached it. The roof had collapsed inward, crushed beneath the combined weight of the HOA's illegal ice piles and the new storm layer on top of them. The metal frame bowed like softened clay, walls split outward, tools half buried beneath splintered boards and frozen debris. My late wife's gardening tools, the ones she painted by hand, were twisted in the wreckage like broken bones. That moment didn't spark anger. Not immediately. It brought something colder, deeper, a stillness that settled inside me the way frost settles into soil. Maple Ridge hadn't just trespassed. Their negligence had pushed until something I built, something I cared for, something with meaning, finally gave way. Standing in the ruins, I made a decision. Words weren't enough anymore. Warnings weren't enough. If Maple Ridge wanted to bury me under their mess, then I would give them something they couldn't shovel away. I returned to the house, grabbed my files, mapped out new footage, and organized everything with the precision of someone who had spent half his life writing reports that had to withstand scrutiny. Then I walked back outside, fired up my compact track loader, the one I used for driveway work, and headed toward the slope. I didn't push their snow onto their side. I didn't cross 1 inch over my boundary. Instead, I moved load after load of their refuse right up to the exact legal edge where Maple Ridge's only exit road narrowed before meeting the county line. One bucket at a time, I built a wall from the materials they had dumped onto me. 7 feet tall, 10 feet thick at the base. Dense, compact, immovable. Then, as temperatures dropped, I sprayed water over the structure. It froze into a gleaming shell so solid you could probably drive a truck into it and leave no dent. I double-checked the GPS coordinates. The wall sat squarely on my land. Not a pebble crossed into theirs. By dusk, it stood finished, a barricade sculpted from their own disrespect. The next morning, the chaos began. My coffee was still steaming when the shouting carried across the road. Residents gathered at the Maple Ridge exit, staring up at the icy wall like it was a mountain that had sprouted overnight. A white SUV with the HOA logo was already stuck in a slush pocket. Engines revved as drivers tried to push through the narrowed access and failed. Then I heard her. Karen Delaney sprinted across the road, red blazer flashing, hands flailing in disbelief as she stared at the barricade. "He's blocked the entire road," she shrieked. "This is criminal. Children are trapped in here." Someone near her spoke quietly but loudly enough for the crowd to hear. Kind of like how our plows blocked his shed. Heads turned. Eyes shifted toward me, toward my land, toward the collapsed structure still visible behind the trees. Karen opened her mouth to counter, but nothing came out. The wall held for 3 full days. Deliveries backed up. Residents parked on the main road and trudged through knee-deep snow to get home. Complaints erupted on Maple Ridge's internal app. By the second day, screenshots of their frantic thread made it to me anonymously. Why is there a glacier at the exit? Did the city approve this? Can we sue him? Wait, didn't we dump on his land first? Someone needs to talk to him. Isn't he a veteran? Their confusion almost amused me. They acted surprised that boundaries had consequences. Each day I reinforced the wall with more refuse, layering it until it resembled something carved by nature rather than a single man. I added orange safety flags along the top because safety matters more than they ever showed me. On day 3, a pair of city workers arrived. They inspected the wall, walked its length, and reviewed my folder complete with video evidence of Maple Ridge's trespassing. The lead inspector, a man named Tyson, flipped through the pages with a growing look of reluctant admiration. "Everything is on your land," he said. "They still have a full lane of pavement. This isn't an obstruction. It's just inconvenient." I shrugged. Their convenience stopped being my responsibility the moment they used my land as a dump. Tyson exhaled slowly. "Expect fireworks from their side. I'm ready." That afternoon, I received an email from Karen, but the tone no longer dripped with superiority. It was controlled panic, wrapped in false politeness. "In the interest of neighborly cooperation, we respectfully request removal of the current ice structure impeding community access." I didn't respond. Instead, I added another layer to the wall. Later, a man walked up cautiously to the boundary, mid-30s, knit beanie, holding a toddler's mitten in one hand. "Name's Mike," he said. "I live on Pignon Lane. Most of us didn't know what they were doing to your place. This," he gestured at the wall, "honestly? Kind of legendary." I nodded. "It'll melt eventually. Hope they learn something before then." He walked off quietly. The next morning was the breaking point. I heard Karen before I saw her. her voice slicing through the cold air. She stormed toward the barricade, face flushed with rage. "This is ILLL Eagle," she screamed at the top of her lungs. "You can't seal off an entire neighborhood. You're endangering lives." I stayed on my porch, arms crossed. "If lives are endangered," I said calmly, "it's because your subdivision has one poorly designed exit. Maybe bring that up at your next board meeting. You think this is funny? No. I think it's justice. You crushed your own shed to frame us," she shouted, grasping wildly for a defense. "I have video of your plows crossing my property line 6 separate times." "Want me to play it?" Her jaw snapped shut. Residents were gathering now, eyes fixed on her rather than me. The support she once commanded evaporated as quickly as the snowflakes on her hair. Someone muttered, "Enough, Karen." Another whispered, "We're tired of this." And for the first time, she looked small. Not powerless, just exposed. She retreated toward the clubhouse, shoulders stiff, refusing every outstretched hand. 3 days later, the wall still stood, the air softened, and Maple Ridge's board fractured like thawing ice. The city issued Maple Ridge a formal notice of investigation. Waste displacement violations, boundary trespass, failure to file proper snow disposal plans. Then came the moment I didn't expect. A letter slid quietly into my mailbox. Heavy paper. Familiar handwriting. Not from Karen. From her attorney. The board wanted a meeting. A quiet resolution. A settlement. A deal. I didn't reply. Quiet wasn't what I was after. Quiet is what they exploited. Now they would face this out in the open. But the real collapse, the one that mattered, was still coming. And it would change Maple Ridge forever. The collapse of Maple Ridge's leadership didn't happen all at once. It cracked slowly, like ice shifting under warm sunlight, until the weight of what they'd done finally broke through their perfect facade. Karen tried to act unfazed at first, parading around in her red blazer as though nothing had changed. But residents weren't buying it, not after the wall. Not after the city crews showed up documenting every corner of their subdivision while ignoring mine entirely. Not after a dozen homeowners finally learned that their HOA had been using my property as a dumping ground to cut corners and save money. The emergency HOA meeting sealed her fate. I didn't attend, not because I wasn't invited, but because I didn't need to. The people inside the gates could fight their own battles now, but my friend Ben kept me updated by text. "She's sweating," he wrote. "Interrogation vibes in this room. Someone asked why the retention basin is empty if the snow was so overwhelming. She can't answer." It's bad, Jack. When the vote came through, a motion to suspend Karen as president pending investigation, it passed by a landslide. A quiet part of me expected relief, maybe satisfaction. Instead, it felt strangely muted. Removing her didn't fix the shed. It didn't erase the weeks of trespass. It didn't undo the collapse or the mess I'd spent months documenting. But it was a start. The next day, Maple Ridge sent a landscaping crew to remove part of the snow heap from my land. Not the whole thing, not even close, but enough to show they understood this wasn't going away quietly. I watched from the porch without waving. I wasn't interested in small gestures. I was waiting for accountability. It came in the form of an official letter from the City of Rosegate's Planning Division. The envelope was crisp, the language sharper. "We have determined that Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association engaged in improper winter waste displacement in violation of Municipal Code 114. Further action is required." For once, it wasn't me warning them. It was the city. In the following weeks, inspectors walked the subdivision with soil probes and laser scanners, reviewing their retention areas, contractor records, disposal logs, which, unsurprisingly, they didn't have. Violations stacked up quickly. Fines followed. Residents grew angrier. The new interim president, a calm and highly competent woman named Laura Wilkins, inherited a storm she didn't create. Meanwhile, I rebuilt. The shed reconstruction took time, but time was something I had plenty of. I insulated the new frame properly, reinforced the roof with stronger trusses, and built a little overhang porch where I could sit during summer rains. Every piece of lumber I cut felt like reclaiming something Maple Ridge had tried to take from me. Neighbors who once looked away now stopped by to help. One older man held beams steady while I drilled. Another brought sandwiches. A kid rode his bike up and dropped off a hand-drawn card of my ice wall with the caption, "Epic." By the time the shed stood fully rebuilt, stronger and taller than the old one, my land no longer felt invaded. It felt defended. Then came the biggest surprise of all. A black rental sedan rolled slowly into my driveway one warm July afternoon. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, business casual attire, someone I recognized but hadn't seen in years. It was Dana, an old colleague who now consulted for city zoning and land use issues. She walked toward the shed, taking it in like she was evaluating a work of art. "You built this by yourself again?" she asked. "Couldn't trust the HOA to help," I joked. Her smile was soft. "Your documentation, the footage, the logs, the maps. Rosegate is using it as a training case now. For contractors. For HOAs. For new inspectors. You changed more than Maple Ridge, Jack." I shrugged, not because it wasn't meaningful, but because I hadn't done any of this to leave a legacy. I just wanted my land back. Before leaving, she said, "If you ever want to consult again, you should call me." I told her I'd stick to woodworking for now. By August, Maple Ridge looked different. Not physically, that would take longer, but socially. Cars slowed respectfully when passing my driveway. People waved without hesitation. Conversations happened at the mailbox with no tension in the air. One afternoon, Laura appeared at the boundary line holding a folder. She didn't cross. She didn't assume anything. She waited until I approached. "We finalized the city resolution," she said, "and the board wanted you to have this." Inside was the official report. Maple Ridge was found at fault for repeated trespass, improper snow relocation, and failure to comply with disposal requirements. They were ordered to overhaul their winter protocols and conduct annual boundary surveys, paid for by the HOA, not me. Then she handed me a check. A large one, too large. "This is part of a new community fund," she explained. "It's meant for property improvements anywhere in the neighborhood, inside or outside the gates. We named it the Carter Boundary Respect Initiative." I raised an eyebrow. "You named it after me?" She nodded. "What happened here taught us something we should have learned a long time ago. Boundaries matter only when you honor them. You forced us to honor them." I accepted the folder, not the check. "Use that money to fix your retention basin," I said. "Or build your residents a second access road. It'll do more good there." Her expression softened into something between gratitude and shame. "I hope you'll still come to the annual cookout." Maybe. When the event arrived, I did go more to observe than to celebrate. Kids ran through sprinklers. Adults chatted over barbecue. No one whispered behind my back or avoided eye contact. Instead, they thanked me. Some apologized. Others simply smiled in passing. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't forgetting. But it was acknowledgement. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Laura approached again. "We still talk about the wall," she said. "Not because it blocked the road, but because it forced us to look at ourselves." I didn't answer right away. I watched the tree line sway in the breeze, my land lit by soft amber light. For the first time in months, it felt truly peaceful. Eventually, I said, "Winter will come again." She nodded. "And we'll stay on our side." By September, life had returned to something close to normal. The cameras I'd mounted early in the conflict remained where they were, but their memory card stayed empty. Tires from Maple Ridge never crossed my ditch. Not one snowflake landed on my property without nature placing it there. And the wall, my improvised monument of consequence, had melted into memory. Grass had grown where it stood. The only proof of its existence now lived in stories, city records, and the quiet changes it sparked. One crisp evening, I walked the boundary line at dusk, stopping where the wall once rose 7 feet high. I ran my hand across the smooth ground, no need for markers anymore. The line was more respected now than it had ever been. Later, as I stood on my new shed porch sipping coffee, I realized something unexpected. The battle hadn't hardened me. It had clarified me. Ownership isn't aggression. Boundaries aren't weapons, but defending what's yours firmly, quietly, patiently can reshape entire communities. Winter would test them again someday, and if anyone ever forgot the lesson carved in ice, I still had the loader. I still had the evidence. And now, I had a neighborhood that understood I wasn't the man to test. This wasn't revenge, it was resolution. And in a strange, steady way, it was peace. If you enjoyed this story and want more HOA showdowns, true boundary battles, and neighbor wars where justice finally finds its level, make sure to subscribe to HOA Stories and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today?